The first thing that comes to mind for me on this subject is the Labor member, the Labor MP in the UK just this week being shot in the face by a neo-Nazi and killed, who's hyped up on this frenzy of refugee and asylum seeker phobia that everyone in the Western world has been subjected to for the last 15 or 20 odd years or more. You open the Herald Scum every day and there's stories in there saying, oh, stop the boats, or refugees are coming to take the place over, and oh, Muslims are trying to take the place over. And what this does is it takes desperate and needy people who are fleeing situations which, as Will pointed out, in many cases are a direct consequence of us participating in wars for oil and for geopolitical dominance, and it turns these people who are running from really difficult situations looking for help into all these scary people who are trying to militarily invade a country or something. I would like to congratulate the Uniting Church for turning your buildings into refugee welcome centres and for having the guts to offer sanctuary to people who are at risk of being deported back to our offshore concentration camps. I think that shows a lot of courage and a lot of spine in the face of this ongoing fear-mongering and scare campaign. The Socialist Alliance definitely supports closing the concentration camps, and we recognise it's absolutely the case that the most humane way of processing refugees is also the cheapest. You process their claims while you let them live in the community, and you give them full working rights while their claims are being processed. What could we do with that $1.2 billion? We could build public housing. It could go into resettlement services. There's a whole bunch of basic services that are crying out for money. I think we need to put the tax rate back up on corporations and on the wealthiest individuals. But certainly there's plenty of stuff that money can be put into, and I think there's an urgent need for public housing. If Australia matched Germany on a per capita basis, we'd be taking about 250,000 refugees from Syria. And again, we're a wealthy country. I don't see why that should be a problem. I don't think Australia should really struggle to absorb that many people into our community. The Socialist Alliance also supports increasing the resettlement of refugees from overseas camps to at least 40,000 a year, and we don't support having a quota on people who arrive by plane or boat.
Finally, to your question.
So, what can you do? How can you talk about how can we strengthen the working class movements in Australia and improve working conditions, particularly for young people?
I think what's happened over the last 30 or 40 years, like back in the 70s, that's when we had the highest level of union density in Australia, and it's also coincidentally, or maybe not so coincidentally, when the largest share of national wealth was going in the pockets of workers, and the smallest share, still a massive amount, but the smallest share was going into the Cayman bank accounts of the super wealthy. And I think that what's happened since then, like in the 80s, Labor brought in all these constrictive laws that hog-tied the unions and massively reduced industrial action and strike action. There's a corresponding big drop in people being members of unions, and then there's been, as a result of that weakening of those working class organisations, that governments have been able to get away with selling off Telstra, selling off the Commonwealth Bank, selling off all these public assets, and trying to start getting rid of free university education and making people pay for that, making people pay for TAFE. So I think a lot of young people, a lot of people are starting to rediscover the need for unions and the need for powerful social movements, because we've just had year after year after year of capitalism giveth and capitalism taketh away. And all of these things that we used to have are getting stripped away. Labor reckon that they're going to campaign pretty hard to stop Medicare being privatised, but I wonder what else they'll turn a blind eye to getting privatised and what they won't sort of invest in. Like Peter was talking before about public housing, and when Labor's in government, Labor does stuff, but the historical record is since the 1980s there's been crumbs put into public housing. There's been no major new public housing development. So yeah, I think people are rediscovering the need to get in, to be a member of a union, to be active in social movements. So our second preference is the Greens. Having moved down from Newcastle, I've got to say I think the Greens have a much healthier culture up in Newcastle and New South Wales. There's much more of a focus on extra parliamentary organising and active participation in social movements. I think the Greens are actually pretty lacking down here in Victoria in that regard. Nonetheless, I think the Greens are definitely streets ahead of everyone else here. They're still definitely our number 2 preference. And I think we're putting the Renewable Energy Party third because we've got a real focus on climate action. I would have to check on that. And then we're certainly putting the Liberals last with our preferences. Just regarding this question of carbon tax, because that's actually an important plank of our policy is climate action and a just transition for workers. The Socialist Alliance was opposed to the carbon tax, and part of the reason we're opposed to that is because it passes the cost of climate action onto workers. I know that there's compensation and all this sort of stuff, but ultimately we think it's problematic to have an economic mechanism which just adds onto the price of electricity, and that's how we're going to address the climate problem. The Socialist Alliance is much more in favour of doing the same thing that governments did to get the current fleet of polluting power stations, and that is build them themselves. That's where all the coal-fired power stations came from, and that's where our new 100% renewable energy grid can come from. And we will have a revenue-generating public asset for decades to come with zero fuel cost. And, it can be run as a break-even enterprise to provide cheap electricity for decades to come. Yeah, I think the main message from the Socialist Alliance is this thing of the importance of extra parliamentary action. I think Uniting Church people are aware of this, and as an organisation, you do raise your voice and you do participate in social movements, and Socialist Alliance can't reaffirm that enough. It's not enough just to get good people in government passing good policy. You really need people power if you want to fundamentally keep that policy, get it implemented, keep it in place.
Thank you, Zane.